Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives. Apologies in advance if it feels like I'm rushing through this video at any point. I just got through a 40-minute recording and I wound up scrapping it because not just technical issues but just flub-ups on my part. So I essentially just got through a whole vlog and just scrapped it and starting again. So again, apologies if it feels like I'm rushing through anything for this one. So yeah, just a heads up. But yeah, as promised, today we're finally gonna get into the main Spider-Verse storyline, and of course, the best way to start that is from the beginning with The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, Number 9, and the issue actually opens with Peter Parker snoozing away at his apartment, just kind of lounging away, doing his own thing, dreaming of whatever, when suddenly his phone starts ringing, and apparently it's a landline, and when Peter answers it, on the other end is J. Jonah Jameson, who is yelling at him about apparently someone causing a ruckus in Armstrong Park, which might not be a real place. I don't think it is, but I've never been to New York, so if it is a real place, I'm sorry. But either way, he wants Peter to go there and get pictures, which is weird, considering that Peter is supposed to be the head of his own company, but whatever. Either way, he slips into his Spidey jammies and talks about how while he may not like getting the early morning wake-up call, this whole thing, this fight couldn't have come at a better time, because apparently he needs money for food, rent, oxygen, student loans, all that nice stuff. If you notice the odd one out there, good for you. You're about to figure out why it was there. But either way, he thinks that whoever is in the fight and causing a ruckus, he hopes that they put on a good show because he needs the money. And sure enough, the one causing a ruckus in the park is Moreland, who Peter doesn't seem to recognize, despite the fact that they apparently had tussle before. However, Peter's spider sense goes into overdrive once he sees Moreland, but before he can do anything, Moreland just tackles him, and as Peter wants to know who the hell he is, especially since Moreland still mentions him by name, Moreland mentions how they've done this before thousands of times across thousands of Earths, and Peter says, "What are you talking about? We're not even on." Before Moreland snaps his neck, saying, "Why should he even bother?" before siphoning out his life force. And it's at this point that we learn what's really going on. Yeah, this is another Earth. Basically the whole gimmick this Earth's gimmick is that mankind colonized the moon. Yeah, for whatever reason, New York is apparently New Lunar York, and the sky, you can actually see the Earth just sitting there, and so, yeah, in this reality, Spider-Man lived on the moon. But now he's dead, so that sucks. Either way, the real Spider-Man, or more specifically the Spider-Man of the main Marvel Universe, he's actually fine, and at the moment he is currently actually snoozing his own apartment and just relaxing in his own way. However, he ends up getting his own little wake-up call as he gets stirred from his sleep. He sees Cindy hanging over him, which causes him to freak out because, again, pheromones problems, well, apparently he sleeps au naturel. So yeah, when you're with someone who causes your hormones to go into overdrive, maybe not a good idea to be naked around them. As such, Cindy actually came to Peter because she wanted to talk to him, and she thinks she might have a solution to their whole pheromone problem. Peter, move away! Which, yeah, even Peter thinks is kind of dumb, because she says, no, I'm getting my whole routine down here, and you can just start fresh somewhere else, do something, like go to another country, another state, maybe even go to the moon, which I think is kind of amusing, which Peter even scoffs off and thinks that's stupid. But either way, he kind of thinks that maybe they shouldn't be having this conversation here, where they're breathing in each other's pheromones, so they should probably just go out into the city and swing around, which, before we get into what happens there, I'll cut back to the Inheritors, the Inheritor Stronghold, which is actually on Earth 001, aka Loom World, which I'm going to refer to it as Loom World from now on because I like giving the worlds nicknames instead of using their official Earth designation numbers. Basically, we actually can see the Inheritors as they are waiting for Moreland to come home, as two of the Inheritors are actually wanting to go out on their own hunt. Deimos, because he's hungry, though it's pointed out he's always hungry, and another new Inheritor, and another of Moreland's, and another sister. In this case, this Inheritor is named Verna, and basically, in terms of looks, she kind of fits what you would think of a more gothic vampire-esque look to gothic royal vampire to have, as she has big pointy hair and wears a long black dress with, I think, a necklace, but don't quote me on that. But the thing is, she is a bitch, plain and simple, and part of the reason for that is in her hunting method. Apparently, in terms of Spidey, she prefers to hunt young Spideys because she thinks they taste ripe when they're that young. They taste nice when they're nice and ripe, and basically to help assist her with these hunts, she has hunting dogs of a sort. I call them hunting dogs as a general term, but in reality, these are feral. Her dogs are actually feral versions of Spider-Man's rogues gallery. And basically, yeah, what she does is that she brings them along with her on certain hunts, and their job is to chase down and essentially tenderize the meat, as it were, keeping the Spideys in line for before Verna can come in for the kill, and they essentially get what's left. And since the Inheritors feast on the life force, you can probably guess what what's left is. So, yeah, that's kind of fucked up. Either way, Morlun comes back after having killed Spider-Moon Man, and Deimos and Verna immediately start giving Morlun some kind of shit as they start asking him, well, what world did you rid of spider totems this day? And Morlun's response is, well, it doesn't matter, any one world is as good as any. And Verna says, whatever you say, brother, before she ends up getting a pack of her own hounds together and asks the Master Weaver to send her to another universe to begin her own hunt. Which, after she leaves, Morlun asks Deimos what Verna meant by by her comment about whatever he said. And so Deimos admits to Morlun that they all know that Morlun, despite what he said, well, there's been one universe across the multiverse that he's been avoiding. Earth 616, the main Marvel universe. Morlun tries defending himself, stating that he's saving that world for last, and when Deimos brings up the possibility of potentially just going to that Earth himself to hunt, Morlun tells him to not even try it, as he calls dibs. But the instant that Morlun walks out of the room, yeah, Deimos pretty much says screw that to Morlun and demands the Master Weaver open a portal to that world. In the meantime, back on Earth 616, we actually do see Peter and Silk swinging through New York doing their own thing, and Peter does start asking questions about why Cindy was really there at the time. Excuse me a second. Puppy stuff. Anyway, like I was saying, Spidey does ask Silk what the heck why she was really there, and Silk actually admits that when she woke up that day, she was thinking of Peter. And only Peter. While initially you could assume that this was because of their whole pheromone attraction thing, Cindy admits that this felt deeper than the whole pheromone thing. Like, it was rooted in her spider sense. And basically, she talks about how it's like, for whatever reason, all the strands of the great web were all converging on Peter, and Peter immediately shoots all that hokum because he thinks it's all done, it's all BS, and he ain't got time for that shit. However, thankfully for him, their conversation is interrupted as there is a bit of a kerfuffle going on in the street as there's a robbery going on. And the thing is, these robbers are actually kind of a special case, as these are people that once upon a time worked for Otto when he was the Superior Spider-Man, even wearing the same henchman uniforms that they had when they worked for him, and walking around in spider tanks that Otto provided them. Yeah, they're not exactly. Yeah, this isn't exactly. Yeah, they're pretty much just there to abuse whatever status they had while working for Otto and essentially just go rogue. So yeah, Spidey and Silk go in to try and take care of these goons, and basically, while Spidey's able to web up one goon and Silk is able to web up the tank, well, a few goons are getting away. And whilst Peter does initially plan to go and pursue, well, the pair actually gets some outside assistance from other Spideys, specifically Spider-Woman and the Marvel Universe version of Spider-Girl, which let's talk about them briefly. For Spider-Woman, I'm not going to get too far into her case, as she will get the spotlight later on in these comics, but put simply, her real name is Jessica Drew, and her gimmick as Spider-Woman is essentially to act as the female counterpart to Spider-Man. And I say, well, sort of. I say that, but that's mostly in the case that when she was created, she was only created because Marvel wanted to have the license to the Spider-Woman name, and, well, Stanley figured that they needed to create a Spider-Woman now, when they could, before someone else did, because they knew that if they didn't, that they would lose it. So, they created so Jessica Drew became the original Spider-Woman. The title has been passed around the Marvel Universe, and various women have held it for a while, with one even using it as a villainous title. But for now, Jessica Drew has it back, and she is the current Spider-Woman. And as for Spider-Girl, well, at the moment, she's acting as Jessica Drew's protege, but her real name is actually Anya Corazon, and she didn't get her start as Spider-Girl. Basically, Anya's gimmick is that she is a girl from Queens who got her powers from the mystical spider society that Ezekiel Sims was a part of. How she got them was that she wound up stumbling across a kerfuffle that was going on between a sorcerer in the spider society named Miguel, no relation to Spider-Man 2099, and representatives from a rival group known as the Sisterhood of the Wasp, who, believe it or not, are going to kind of be important later in these vlogs. Much later, but still later. And basically, in the midst of the battle, Anya was nearly killed. However, Miguel was able to save her life by use the ritual, which essentially kind of bound her to the mystical spider whatevers, and as a result, her life was saved, and she wound up getting spider powers. After this, she wound up joining the Spider Society as a hunter, and essentially assist them in fighting against the Sisterhood of the Wasp, taking on the dual identity of Aranya. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that again, but that's how I've been reading it, and someone correct me if I'm wrong. If that's the incorrect pronunciation. But basically, I've read the original Ranya run. It's fine, pretty good, nice little kid superhero, nice little superhero antics. But basically, after the Aranya run was done, she wound up taking on the mantle of Spider-Girl and has essentially been trying to find her own place in the Marvel Universe since, which is why she's here. As like I said, she's currently shadowing Jessica Drew and acting as her protege. And so they basically come in to try and offer Spider-Man some assistance. But in the meantime, Spidey also gets some more help from, well, Miguel O'Hara, who comes swinging in his own Spidey jammies to take out another goon. And the reason he's here is because, again, the stuff with Moreland that happened in his lead-in issue. Because he wants to try and inform Peter about this. In the meantime, though, the remaining goons realize that 5 Spideys in one place is not a good thing, so they say, screw this, and try to run away. But the end result of this is that they end up getting more company, as 3 more Spideys show up into the fray. Specifically, Spider UK, Mayday Parker, and Spider-Ham, with Spider-Ham in particular delivering the coup de grace to the fleeing mooks. So, yeah, that's actually pretty... So, yeah... Naturally, with all these Spideys gathered in one place, Peter is, of course, going, what the hell is going on? What's with all the spider people right now? As such, Spider UK does tell Peter about the whole inheritor thing, and how all the various Spideys in the multiverse have been drawn here because all the strands of the Web of Life and Destiny are converging on Peter right now, which I do kind of like that Cindy does kind of rub it in his face about how she told him, but... well, Peter isn't fully buying this. While they do explain that while Billy Braddock does explain that they're all Spideys from other universes, well, basically Peter thinks it's all a big Mysterio thing, with evidence of that being Spider-Ham again, because he's an anthropomorphic cartoon pig. Basically, when you see that, at that point you're going to start questioning your sanity a little, even if you do live in the Marvel universe. However, Mayday does go in and manage to convince Peter that they're on the up and up when she unmasks, because the thing is, Peter knows her, so to speak. Basically, during Mayday's solo book, during one particular storyline, she wound up getting sent back in time and actually did meet Peter in his early days while he was still in high school. And basically, during that storyline, she did run into Peter in and out of her spider costume, as when she went to the high school, she met Peter and introduced herself as Mayday, because, well, she was trying to cover up her identity, and so her nickname was better than her full name. And then likewise, when she met Peter in her Spidey jammies, well, he thought that she was a copycat, and they wound up duking it out. Though by the end of the story, she did convince him that she was on the up and up. And basically, by the end of the story, Peter never did figure out that Mayday and Spider-Girl were one and the same, but when Mayday unmasks herself, Peter does recognize her, and I'm guessing at this point he is able to put 2 and 2 together and realize that Mayday and Spider-Girl are one and the same. And so she does confirm to him that what they're saying is true, and that the reason they're here is because they could track they track the inheritors here, and they need Peter's help. Of course, Peter wants to know why the hell do they want him, and Bailey admits it's because Peter's actually fought the inheritors before, specifically Moreland. And the instant that Peter hears Moreland's name, he starts freaking out, going, "Wait, Moreland's coming here?" But then Mayday gives no, actually, we got this, that we detected the signal of one of his siblings, his older brother Deimos. And the instant that Peter hears that, he's like, oh, it's like, wait, Moreland has an older brother, and he's coming here, and he's meant to be bigger. And so, yeah, at that point, Peter starts freaking out even more so, and just tells all the assembled Spideys to get into the portal right now. They need to leave before this guy shows up. Well, luckily for Peter, when Deimos does arrive on Earth 616, it's not in New York. Unfortunately, he does end up running into another Spider-Man. Hold on one second. Again, dog stuff. But, yeah, basically, it's not Peter that Deimos ends up crossing paths with. It's actually another Spider-Man. Specifically, Kane Parker, the current Scarlet Spider. Which, yeah, I should probably explain both of those things. Firstly, the Scarlet Spider identity. Going back to the Clone Saga, during the time when Ben Reilly wound up coming back to New York, he did briefly take on a different dual identity before he took back up the Spider-Man mantle. And basically, he wound up calling himself the Scarlet Spider, though in universe that was not his choice. Apparently, it was something a reporter called him, and well, he just hated the name from the outset and wanted nothing to do with it, but the name stuck, so he went with it, which I don't know why he didn't like it. I think Scarlet Spider is an awesome superhero name, but either way, Ben did briefly carry that mantle before he went back to being Spider-Man. But as for the current Scarlet Spider, as I mentioned, his name is actually Kane Parker, and like Ben, he got his start in the Clone Saga, the second one, so to speak. When he was actually introduced as a villain, and his main gimmick was that, put simply, he hated Ben Reilly. And for all the years that Ben was on the run and just kind of acting as a silent superhero, Kane always pursued him and just wanted to make his life a living hell. And once he heard that Ben was active in New York and doing his own thing, Kane went after him something fierce and wanted to continue doing everything in his power to destroy everything that Kane loved and held dear. However, for whatever reason, Kane seemed to have nothing but praise for Peter Parker and basically everything that he had struggled for and tried to win. And ultimately, it wasn't until the storyline called The Trial of Peter Parker that you learned why. It was because Kane was also a clone of Spider-Man. But the thing is, while Ben Reilly was essentially the good clone, the perfect clone, who basically was a dead ringer for Peter, Kane was one of the bad clones, a faulty clone. Basically, his genetics were mixed up, and he suffered from a genetic disease which not only caused him immense pain, but also wound up souping up his spider powers to high degrees. And as a result, he was considered a reject and was essentially dumped. Again, hold on a second. Again, dog stuff. But anyway, like I said, Kane was a reject clone, was essentially dumped. And as a result of not only getting thrown aside, but also because of his genetic defects, he has had a very hard life, and he essentially resented Ben Reilly for having for essentially being the perfect clone, the favorite son, so to speak. But the thing is, because of his genetic defects, his spider powers are actually souped up to high degrees, as his strength, speed, and agility far surpassed that of Ben Reilly's. His spider sense was augmented to the point where he could actually see the future, and his wall crawling abilities were enhanced to such a degree that that if he touched someone, he could actually burn them, which is an ability he used quite often to kill people, and even called it his Mark of Cain, which ultimately kind of got Peter arrested for murder because his fingerprints are Peter's fingerprints. So there you go. But either way, he essentially hated Ben, though it was also during the Clone Saga when he and Ben were able to essentially bury the hatchet and even essentially label them and even call themselves brothers. Though shortly after this little thing, Kane was sadly killed in a battle. Unfortunately, however, prior to Superior Spider-Man, Kane was revived, and the genetic defects he suffered from were cured, so he was made a perfect clone again. As such, he still had to live with all the terrible things he had done while he was a villain, and so he initially did try to run away, and he initially tried to run away and go to Mexico. But on his way there, he wound up stopping in a town in either Texas or New Mexico, but don't quote me on that. And he wound up and basically he kind of got roped in and wound up helping out people that were there, even donning his own Spidey costume, and well, unintentionally going on becoming the second Scarlet Spider. And while initially reluctant to take up the role, he decided that maybe he could actually try and do some good to make up for all the bad he's done, and ever since he had been the new bearer of the Scarlet Spider title. Which also on top of that, apparently during that time he wound up joining up with the group known as the New Warriors, and apparently their base was at Mount Wundagore, which is supposed to be a mountain that's supposed to be home to a bunch of mystical stuff in the Marvel Universe. But unfortunately, though, as I mentioned, Kane is currently the target of Deimos' ire, as the New Warriors have been wiped out. They're not actually dead; they're just knocked aside. And Kane, unfortunately, is not doing so well against Deimos either, as like Mayday in the previous issue, Deimos has his boot heel on Kane's neck. However, Kane does manage to try and get some little burst of fight in him as he tries to attack Deimos, and he does it in a way that's actually pretty unique to him. He ends up growing spikes out of his arms and stabs Deimos in the shoulder, which actually hurts Deimos, which even he's surprised that he felt pain there, which, yeah, this is actually another thing I need to go on a little tangent for. Because you see, the reason Kane was able to do this isn't because these are unique to him as a clone of Spider-Man. The reason he's able to do this is because he is currently playing host to a special spider totem called the Other. And the Other is actually a key in Morland's second defeat, as the last time that Peter and Morland clashed, well, put simply, Peter nearly died. He was hurt so badly that he had to be hospitalized and was near death. But in that state, he wound up receiving a vision of this weird large spider that essentially told Peter that it could give him new life if he let it in. And Peter wound up accepting the spider, and the spider wound up bonding with him, healing him up, and giving him new abilities, which in this case were the spikes. The thing is, that mystical spider was actually called the Other, and it is one of the few spider totems in the multiverse who can actually hurt the Inheritors, and it was with the Other's assistance that Peter was able to kill Morland the second time. Again, it's explained why he's still around if he was killed before, but that's later on in the story. But either way, for whatever reason, because I didn't read that portion, between then and now, Peter did wind up losing the Other. He's still fine, but he no longer has access to the extra abilities that come with playing host to the Other. And I'm guessing one more day has something to do with it, but don't quote me on that. But basically, to try and play, yeah. Hold on a sec. Again, sorry about that. Anyway, like I was saying, at some point between then and now, Peter did lose the Other. Again, I think it might have something to do with One More Day, but don't quote me on that. But during Kane's solo book as the Scarlet Spider, apparently he wound up becoming host to it right now. Or maybe it happened when he was revived. I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't there. Either way, Kane is now the current host to the Other, and thus by playing host to the Other, he also gains access to all the extra abilities that come with it. And again, that includes the spikes and now being able to actually hurt the Inheritors. However, Deimos is actually thrilled that he's encountered the Other, because in his eyes, that means that that makes Kane that much of an extra tasty morsel, as the Other is supposed to be one of those very special spider totems in the multiverse, and so he believes that he'll just savor Kane for days. However, like with Peter and New York, Kane does get some help from the Spider Army as a portal opens and a team of Spideys comes out to save him. Specifically, Old Man Spider, Spider-Gwen, a version of Ben Reilly from a universe where he stayed on as Spider-Man. We'll get to him much later, trust me. And the Spider-Man of the Bullet Points universe, aka Bruce Banner. I'll talk about him later. Trust me, I have thoughts. But either way, But either way, they manage to come in, and Bruce is able to distract Deimos enough for the other Spideys to come in and help Kane. But the instant Kane realizes one of these Spideys is Gwen Stacy, well, he starts kind of freaking out in a similar way to Peter, as apparently, as during the original Clone Saga, Gwen was cloned too, and so he thinks that this has the Jackal written all over it. However, Ben Reilly is able to confirm that they are actually on the up and up, and that Kane needs to come with them because they need his help. But in the midst of all this, sadly, Bruce Banner ends up getting his spine snapped by Deimos, and as a result, the other Spideys had to grab Kane and make a run for it, with even Old Man Spider lamenting that they lost another Spidey before they go through the portal. As such, both teams of Spideys end up going to what they call the safe zone. And basically, it's a universe of the multiverse. It's an Earth in the multiverse that they feel that the Inheritors can't reach, and that's mostly because of this world's gimmick. Which, again, I'm sorry, I do need to go off on another tangent a little and go into into Spider-Man history. Or more specifically, Marvel history, as in the Marvel Universe, there is a character known as Captain Universe, and Captain Universe's biggest shtick is that he is powered by this weird quasi-dimensional force called the Enigma Force, which is supposed to grant whoever is bonded with it untold cosmic power, basically giving them cosmic awareness, enhanced strength, the ability to fly, shoot cosmic rays. They're essentially, if you're bonded with the Enigma Force, you gain ultimate power, and whoever is bonded with the Enigma Force takes on the mantle of the superhero Captain Universe. But the thing is, the Enigma Force is alive, and, well, despite Captain Universe being a hero in the Marvel Universe, his dual identity tends to change, as the Enigma Force has a habit of bopping from host to host, finding different people to give powers to before leaving them to find someone else. Basically, no one person in the universe, no one person is Captain Universe. The title is passed around from person to person, and because of this nature, various heroes in the Marvel Universe have wielded the Enigma Force. The Hulk has wielded it, I think Captain America at one point, and of course, Spider-Man wielded it for a time. Now, of course, like with other heroes, he did eventually have to give it up and move on, but in this universe, the safe zone, he never lost them. He stayed bonded with the Enigma Force, and thus he still is gifted with his almighty cosmic powers, which is ultimately why this Earth is a safe zone, because, well, while the Inheritors may be a match for most other Spideys in the multiverse, Cosmic Spider-Man is on a whole other level, and if any of the Inheritors came to this Earth to try and munch on him, he could just annihilate them with a thought. So, yeah, his Cosmic Spider-Man's Earth is off the table, which also makes his world the perfect safe zone, which, once both teams of Spideys arrive back in his universe, even Peter, basically, after everyone gets kind of situated and wants to know what's going on, Peter does start putting two and two together and does ask one very important question, and does start asking questions. One of which is, because if Cosmic Spider-Man is so powerful that he can just take down the Inheritors with no issue, then why doesn't he just go to their world and then just wipe them out? And Cosmic Spider-Man's response is, well, he can't. Basically, the Enigma Force is tied to whatever universe it calls home. And, well, if Cosmic Spider-Man left his universe, the Enigma Force wouldn't go with him, and so the instant he left his world, he would go back to being just another plain old Spider-Man. However, he also admits that in the battle to come, if even one Spider-Man will make a difference, he will gladly join the army. And at this point, Peter starts asking questions like, wait, what are you talking about? What battle? What army? And so, Spider UK reveals another reason why they grabbed Peter. Because, well, in their own words, he is the greatest Spider-Man of all, and they want him to lead their army, which shocks Peter something fierce. However, before this story ends, we actually have one last thing to tune in on. So remember Verna when she was sent off to go on her own hunt? Well, it's time to see who she's hunting. And in this case, we cut to the Ultimate Universe, which, if you don't know, the Ultimate Universe is supposed to be like a revamped Marvel Universe that basically which is supposed to reestablish the Marvel heroes, but in a more modern setting. And basically, in this universe, and basically the Spidey she's hunting is Miles Morales, which, yeah, Miles Morales actually got his start in the Ultimate Universe, and basically he got his start replacing the original Spidey of the Ultimate Universe, who at one point did end up getting killed. He got better, but that's another thing altogether. Either way, Miles was either way, for a time, Miles was the Spider-Man of the Ultimate Universe. The circumstances did change, which I'll talk about later, but for now, he lives in a separate universe, and when we tune into him now, he's kind of lamenting being Spider-Man right now, as at the moment he's standing over his mother's grave, and kind of is feeling kind of useless as a superhero, especially since he couldn't save his family. And apparently because of the death of his uncle, who was a supervillain by the name of the Prowler, which you probably know if you've seen Into the Spider-Verse, and the death of his mother, which, yeah, his mom did die, like other Spidey, she got better. Like other people, she got better. But and basically his father blames him for everything. So basically in the midst of all this, as he's mourning over his mom's grave, he does end up kind of getting a bit of a pep talk from another Spidey of the Ultimate Universe, specifically the Ultimate version of Jessica Drew, who, in the Ultimate Universe, is actually a clone of Peter Parker. That's not a joke. She actually in the Ultimate Universe, Jessica Drew is a clone of Peter Parker, and like the Jessica Drew, the main universe, she was this world's first Spider-Woman, but at the moment she is currently holding the mantle of the Black Widow. Still has spider powers though, so she's still a Spidey. But either way, she's kind of a pseudo mentor to Miles Morales, and she does want to try, and she's just here to kind of offer him comfort and ease him through what he's feeling, but they don't really have a lot of time to do that, as the story ends with a portal opening above them, and Verna flying in with her team of crazed supervillains ready to kill the pair, so that's a fun time. But even with that, the comic is not over. There's still one more thing we need to talk about, and this one is actually an epilogue / backup story, which when it comes to the whole plot, the summaries and my thoughts on the whole comic, I'm just gonna consider this part of the story, as it's just essentially us tuning into the villains. But the story is called The Feast, and what the biggest gimmick and the big thing with this storyline is, the Inheritors are sitting down for dinner and complaining because they can't get a bite to eat. But the thing is, the morsels that are being put on display are some of the Spideys they hunted, with Brix and Bora presenting their own monstrous Spideys, with Brix as being a vampire Spider-Man, while Bora's offering is a man-spider Spider-Man, and which makes double the spider, with us double the points, and Deimos presenting Bullet Point Spider-Man, who, yeah, is not dead yet. In fact, none of these Spideys are dead. It's just that they're so badly injured that they can't really do anything to fight back, so yeah, essentially they're just there to feast on them for supper. However, like I said, the Inheritors are kind of wondering when they can finally get started on eating. And it's also here when we meet the final Inheritor that we shall be meeting for Spider-Verse, and the one that's ultimately considered kind of the big bad for Spider-Verse. The father of the Inheritors, Solus, and while I say we meet him here, it's only in the sense that he's in this part of the story. But throughout this whole portion of the comic, you don't actually see him clearly. Because throughout the whole story, his back is to a fireplace, so his front is shrouded in shadow, and the only details you can make out from him are his eyes, and a few bits of his face every now and then when there's a panel that does a close-up on him. But pretty much, but either way, they're asking their dad when they can start eating, and he says that that they'll at least wait for Moreland to show up because, well, Moreland's considered the favorite son of the Inheritors. But thankfully the Inheritors don't have to wait long, as the Master Weaver ends up opening a portal, which Moreland ends up walking through, and in his arms he's carrying another Spider-Man, specifically a Spidey from a world where the pharaohs of Egypt still reign supreme. Which actually was a story, an alternate timeline from an issue of New Warriors, but don't quote me on that. I do want to read that book one day, but that's for another story altogether. Either way, he plops that Spider-Man down on the table, and, well, the Inheritors are giddy to get started. They finally get eating, though in the case of Genix, it's more that he just wants to get back to his research. But before they get started, Solus does start asking about their offerings and so forth, which does prompt Brix and Bora to start an argument over who Spidey is better. But in the midst of their argument, Bora brings up how she would have had more Spideys at the show just to have to her name if Brix and Karn hadn't gotten their way when they found that group. And the instant that Moreland and Deimos hear about Karn, they're like, "Wait, you ran into the Outcast?" And at first they have a good laugh at this, until Genix points out the other detail about their story, that they encountered a team of Spideys. And as Genix says, that's not something that's happened before. The Spideys have never ganged up like that before. But Deimos just kind of brushes it off because, again, he encountered a group of Spideys when he went to get Bullet Point Spider-Man. Like, again, because his intended target was Kane, and even he says he was, oh, that would have been a great totem too, because not only was he a spider totem, but he was host to the Other, and a spider from Earth 616, which the instant that Moreland hears that Deimos went to Earth 616, even when he was told not to, it prompts them to get into an argument, and it almost escalates into a full-on fight, but Solus pretty much tells them to shut up and sit back down. And as a result of this, yeah, but bottom line, when hearing the information about the Other, he does let his children know he's known about the location of the Other for some time now, as well as 2 other special spider totems that he only calls the Bride and the Scion. We don't learn more details in that little moment, but it's essentially just laying down little plot threads for what's to come later, but put simply, the fact that he has put special emphasis on them does imply that they're a bit important. But either way, with that calmed down, he does still ask his children how they all view the Great Web, since they have the Master Weaver trapped under their command. They now technically have control over the Web of Life and Destiny, which, by the way, I do like the moment when Moreland comes back, because you do get a good look at the Great Web of Life and Destiny, and in every little pocket of the webs, you actually do see bits and pieces of other universes and those worlds' respective Spideys, which I think is honestly really damn cool. But either way, each of the inheritors do give their thoughts on it. Brix and Boris say they see it as a playground that they were told that they'll be able to continue their game forever and ever until the end of time. Genix sees it as a challenge and as a puzzle, which the Master Weaver told him he'd never be able to unravel, which he takes the challenge. Deimos sees it as an excuse to engage in endless debauchery because he was told that his father's lifeline would far exceed his own, so he would never have to wear a crown, and thus he can just spend the rest of his eternal life just partying, drinking, and having fun. While Moreland sees it as a birthright, something that a duty to their family, and something that they need to closely safeguard, which Solus tells them they're all right. It's all things. It's everything. And that at the end of the day, because the Great Web is theirs, that's why they lay claim to the title of the Inheritors of All Reality. Which finally causes someone to speak up. Specifically, the Egyptian Spider-Man that Moreland brought with him, as he begins talking about how they're all pretty much full of it, and that while they may lay claim to the Web of Life and Destiny, it's the spiders who walk along its strands and who will stand up to stop them. Which prompts Moreland to pretty much go nuts on this particular Spidey, because again, he's an alternate version of Peter Parker, and tells him to pretty much shut up. He's tired of hearing his speeches. He's tired of answering his questions. Why won't he at the end of the day realize what he is to the Inheritors? Just food. Which finally Solus says, well said, son, and finally gives his kids permission to siphon the life force out of the gathered Spider-Men. So that's nice. But yeah, finally, let's get to my thoughts on the comic as a whole. I think this is actually a strong start to the storyline, and the thing is, while initially it does feel like it could be a problematic start, because essentially when Spidey is brought into the fray, it's like he's only done so because a group of Spideys come in and say, hey, we need your help. I'm willing to excuse that because, well, we've had plenty of lead-in material to help set up everything. In the case of that initial storyline, and in the case of this, we've seen the threat established in those things. We've seen the various teams of Spideys gathering together to face off against these creatures, these monsters, and we've established just how much of a threat the Inheritors truly are. In Superior Spider-Man number 33, we saw that they literally hold the keys to the multiverse in their hands by imprisoning the Master Weaver, who, like I said, his web is meant to be the foundation of all reality, so they can now freely use it to jump between universes. We've seen how they fare in a fair fight against the Spideys, as their abilities far surpass their own, and they're practically unkillable because of this, which, yeah, like I said, is OP, but it does establish them as a threat. We've seen the Inheritors as they go across the multiverse, and how they engage in their hunt, and just how they view everything as just a game or lunchtime. That to them, the spiders are literally just pigs that are meant to be led to the slaughter, and how little they view them or care about them. We've seen various Spideys as they've been pulled into the event, and how they react to learning of the news. So essentially, at this point, the story, basically, the building blocks have been established. We just need to get it. At this point, we just need to like I said, well, build on top of that, create a strong structure from that, and we get that, and we get the beginnings of that in this issue. As in the comic, we see as basically, since this storyline takes place in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man, ultimately the main purpose of this issue is to show Spidey getting pulled into the event and how he fits into how he fits into everything. Because, like I said, he's encountered Moreland before. He has duked it out with him, and now from his perspective, a bunch of Spider-Men just came knocking at his door and saying, "Look, hey, you know that Moreland guy you fought before? He's coming back and he's bringing his family." And Peter's reaction is the way, and I think anyone would react in the situation, "Oh shit, we need to get out of here." And I do think it's a good, strong beginning. And on top of that, it still continues further establishing the Inheritors as a threat, because now they finally started setting their sights on Earth 616, and it's here that we start to learn that there might be something greater unfolding in the background. As going into the scene with the Inheritors when they're sitting down to feast on the assembled spider totems they've captured, they talk about the specific spider totems, specifically the Other, the Bride, and the Scion. And this is the first that we've heard that they're specifically looking for these totems, because up until this point, all we've really seen from the Inheritors is that they're literally just hunting Spideys. We've seen them go from universe to universe and just blindly kill Spider-Man for their own reasons. Moreland, because it's part of the hunt and he's got a vendetta against Peter, and thus he's taking out that rage on his counterparts by proxy. For Karn, he's doing it because he's trying to earn a seat back with his family because he's been banished. For Brix and Bora, it's just a game to them and they enjoy the hunt of it. While for Deimos just likes hunting and just likes to feed on these things and just sees them as food. Which I'm guessing it's a similar case with Verna too, although she's not really focused on, because this is really just because, like I said, this issue is just acting as her introduction, and put simply, her first impressions are she's kind of a bitch. So there you go. But ultimately, the whole story really is, ultimately, the whole issue is meant to just help because at this point, we've already established what the grand threat is and how the Spideys are dealing with it. It's just that now we need to get the main universe Spider-Man in on it. Because he's aware, because like I said, he's already encountered these things before. Now he just needs to be pulled into the fray. And admittedly, when I first read this issue, I was a little surprised that they called the main universe Spider-Man the best Spider-Man of them all, he's technically the first Spider-Man, as it was because of him that all these other Spider-Men are. It's because he's the mirror that all these Spideys are reflected off of. But at the same time, he's no different from a lot of other Spider-Men, so it initially confused me. It's explained in the next issue why they say he's the greatest Spider-Man in the bunch, but either way, that's later. This is now, so we'll get to that when we get to that. But with that being said, the comic does still lay down foundation for more things to come, especially in regards to not only the stuff with the Inheritors and their overall plan, but also in terms of character. When we see Kane and Ben Reilly meeting, it is really cool to actually see that. It sets up not just that. It not only sets up the thing that finally convinces Kane, okay, you guys are on the up and up, but also establishes that in another world, Ben is alive and Kane has another chance to essentially work alongside him. So that does get answered later on in the storyline. Though admittedly that only gets paid off of in tie-in, so it's going to be a while before we get to it. So, but by that same token, in terms of character, by that same token, it also is a way of pulling Spider-Man into the fray and catching him up to speed. Because again, he's asking questions of the wazoo when he's pulled in. When he sees all these Spider-Men, when he sees all these Spideys here and pulled into Earth 13, he keeps asking questions and he starts realizing, okay, so there's more people like Moreland out there. And this is probably one of the few places in the multiverse we can gather without worrying about being killed. So I do like that, but again, the story does leave enough details in the dark for it to be expanded on later. Again, like I said, because of the lead-in material, we know the situation. We know what Peter's going to be walking into, It's just that at this point, we need Peter to get up to speed on all that. He needs to learn what's going on and where he, and like I said, where he fits into the fray. And so, basically, all this stuff is somewhat new to him, and how he has to deal with it, and learn that there's a bigger threat on the horizon that he is going to be playing a big part in stopping. So I do think that's interesting. I do think I like that and seeing how it goes. But I think what makes it work too, and again going with character stuff, is once again we do see more stuff with Mayday. Going back to what happened in the last issue when Deimos slaughtered Mayday's family, well, now we're starting to see how that's affecting her. When Mayday first appears in the comic, she basically is cutting through everything. And while she's not, like, hectic or anything, when she talks to Peter, she's like, look, we need you to understand this. Because we need you to understand this, which is what leads to her unmasking in front of him, saying, look, you know me and you know who I am, right? But so you can trust me when I say these people are real and that we need your help in stopping them. Which, for her, that makes sense why she would be that desperate. And when she ends up going back to the safe zone, well, while she was away, Cosmic Spider-Man was taking care of her brother. And when she comes back, she just holds him. Like she thanks the cosmic counterpart to her dad and says, thank you, he's my whole world, my whole family now. Because again, as I mentioned, she has no idea what the fate of the rest of her family is. She knows her dad is dead, but she doesn't know what happened to her boyfriend or her mother. So, literally, this baby is all she has left. And the fact that, it's sad, but also it's a little heartwarming when the other Spideys say, hey, you're not alone, we're here for you, us Spideys gotta stick together. It's honestly really sweet and nice in that regard. And, like I said, from here, it's just essentially establishing where Peter fits into everything, what role he has to play in the oncoming battle, while also establishing that there is going to be a battle later on. It's essentially just getting the armies ready at this point. And I have not talked about a lot of the tie-ins, and for some of them, they do showcase how the armies are being built, so to speak. But at the very least, it is cool seeing all the Spideys actually gathering together. And basically, when Spidey and Silk end up encountering not only Spider-Woman, Spider-Girl, and Spider-Man 2099, but also the other Spideys, it is admittedly kind of fun, and it's a nice little clusterfuck in the best way possible. Especially when Peter starts being, it's like, whoa, 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 what's with all the spider people around here? Especially, which I think is really nice. And so when the comic ends with him saying, or when the story ends with them stating, we want you to be our leader because you're the best of us all, yeah, his reaction is the same that I was. Wait, what? Which, again, I don't hate Peter, but again, what makes him so special? It's explained in the next comic, but still. But again, it also does leave us with a cliffhanger when we see Miles Morales getting targeted by Verna, but that'll be explained in the next issue as well. But it also does well. But another thing that I think worked in this issue, it established the Inheritors more. Now, like I said, a problem with the Inheritors is that they're a bit OP for my liking, and basically, I understand why why they're this powerful, is they have to have a big enough threat to warrant all these Spideys teaming up. But by that same token, what keeps me from hating the Inheritors, it's their family, it's their dynamic. While the Inheritors may be uber powerful villains, they're not all, oh, let's throw our weight around or whatever. They all have very definable personalities, and when those personalities are allowed to work off of each other, it's actually kind of amusing. When I read through the issue, I noticed that right away, and that happens as early as when Deimos and Verna are waiting for Moreland to get back from killing Spider-Moon Man. Because basically, Deimos wants to go right ahead and say, look, I'm hungry. I want to go to a new world right now. And Verna's like, you're always hungry. And Deimos is about to argue, and he's like, no, you're right. You're right. That's true. But then when when he realizes they're waiting for Moreland, it's like, oh, good, Moreland, the father's favorite son. What an ass. It's kind of amusing, and it's nice little family bickering, and it makes it even better is that the instant that Moreland actually appears, they just shift gears and be like, oh, Moreland, dear brother, good to see you again. How's the hunt going? What Spider-Man did you kill today? Like, I admit, that's actually kind of funny. That's just some nice little sibling bickering to help build their characters, and the fact that Deimos and Verna continue giving Moreland shit after he comes back, It's amusing. It's actually funny, and it's continued to be, and that is continued to be expanded on in the feast epilogue. As when the various inheritors are sitting around and talking, it does feel like they're just a group of high and mighty assholes who really are high on their own power, but see this whole thing as just a family affair. Like these are the guys who are the inheritors of the multiverse, of the holders of the web of life and destiny, and he who weaves that web. And yet for them, they're just and yet all they're doing is just complaining about when the rest of them will come home, when the rest of the family will come home so they can start eating. Like that's it's dark. It's honestly darkly humorous in that regard. And when they start bickering, it feels like genuine family bickering. I like seeing Brix and Bora and their sibling rivalry. And when Solus asks about the offerings they do, they just get into an argument about, oh no, my Spidey's better. No, my Spidey's better. And then they just start bitching and moaning at each other. And when Morlun and Deimos almost break out into fighting, it again helps not only establish their characters, but also establishes their connection. And basically, yeah, Deimos, because of of what he was told about the Web of Life and Destiny and how he would never have to wear the crown and that Solus would outlive him, well, essentially, it's just, basically, it explains his utter disregard for basically everything. And if I can give another comment to the comic, each of the responses the inheritors give to how they view the Web of Life and Destiny, I think is a nice little window into their characters. For Brix and Bora, the whole gimmick for the hunt for them is that it's a game. That basically all they have to do, that basically they're always competing against each other to try and see who can kill the most Spideys. And so they view they view the web as their eternal playground, that they can just go anywhere they want in the multiverse and continue the game forever. And likewise for Genix, it's a puzzle, which is a nice way to reflect his scientific mind. Like I said, he's an inventor, he's a scientist, and of course, the Web of Life and Destiny is supposed to be the foundation of all reality. And so to know the web is to know reality. And so when the Master Reaver tells him you'll never learn how this thing works, he hears that and thinks, oh, I think I will. I like that. It gives more reason. And even going back to Deimos and Morlun, Deimos' response explains why he's so cavalier all the time, why he's so willing to throw his power around, because to him, this is all just him getting the most out of life while he can, and to him, that's forever, to his knowledge. And for Morlun, I can kind of see why he's considered the favorite son, because out of all the inheritors, he's the only one that treats this like a sacred duty. Yes, he has a beef with Spider-Man. He has a beef with Peter Parker, but in his own words, to the inheritors, the Spideys are just food. And despite all their posturing and speechifying, that's all Morlun says they'll ever be to them. And basically, when his answer is he sees the Web of Life and Destiny as his family's sacred duty, as something they need to carry on, it actually makes sense. Because out of all the inheritors, he's the one that truly takes this as a duty, not just as a game, but as something that the family needs to do to uphold their birthright, so to speak. And which I think fits into why Solus would probably consider him the favorite son. And even going into Solus, you really get a sense of how intimidating this guy is. You just see him shrouded in shadow throughout the whole epilogue scene, talking about just pretty much commanding everyone with just a few words and only raising his voice every once in a while. It's clear that this guy is the big boss around here, and basically the fact that none of the inheritors are willing to question him, it's clear that that he holds some sway over all of them, which, by the way, yeah, he's a bit abusive. Yeah, I'm just going to say that right now. He's an abusive daddy. And really not. And we later learned that he's the one that helped make the inheritors so reliant on Spideys. But that's another story altogether, which I'm not going to get into. Put simply, yes. Yeah. It's a good way of showcasing the characters, but also laying the groundwork for them as they begin learning, again, like I said, they're learning... They're learning about the Spidey's gathering and their respective reactions to it, which I think is really cool at laying down foundation for the story, as well as having them have to try and adapt to essentially the game being changed, because before they were just going from universe to universe hunting Spideys, but to now learn that the Spideys are now gathering up. it means that they're going to need to start planning around that as well. Now, while Solus thinks that it's no big deal because he's already got everything planned out ahead of time, well, Genix does still show some slight concern, and so learning that the Spideys are going around, it does bring up it does make him start wondering, what are they planning? So it is some interesting, so it does continue furthering stuff along for them as villains, and it does showcase more about why I don't hate them as much as other people do. With that being said, do I think the comic is perfect? Maybe. Well, there is one thing, and I think the story does continue further showcasing why one of the problems with Spider-Verse, and one of the things that does still get my goat, namely the sacrificial lambs. Let's go back to that scene with Kane Parker and how he was saved by the Spider Army. Remember how I mentioned how Bullet Point Spider-Man was killed off? I knew a Bullet Point Spider-Man prior to reading Spider-Verse, and I call him Bullet Point Spider-Man because the miniseries that he spawned from was a miniseries called Bullet Points, and the gimmick for Bullet Points was that it was an alternate Marvel universe where Dr. Abraham Erskine, the creator of the Super Soldier Serum, was shot and killed 24 hours earlier than he was in the main universe, and as a result, Steve Rogers never became Captain America. However, rather than it just being a world without Captain America, the biggest gimmick in the universe was that certain characters in the Marvel universe wound up adopting different superhero identities, which, in lieu of not becoming Captain America, Steve Rogers instead wound up becoming the first Iron Man, and on top of that, one of Dr. Erskine's MPs that were guarding him, well, he was also shot and killed too, and that MP was a young Ben Parker, which means that when Peter wound up going to live with his Aunt May, there was no Uncle Ben there, so Peter kind of grew up to be rebellious. And, well, that one thing led to another, and during a field trip he ran off to be rebellious, and he wound up getting caught in a gamma blast and became that world's Hulk. So where does that leave Bruce Banner? Well, the thing is, like I mentioned, he became that world's Spider-Man, as feeling guilty for what happened to Peter, he wanted to try and find a cure for him, and to try and find a cure, he wound up experimenting on a spider that was also caught in the gamma blast, and unfortunately, as he tried to perform an autopsy on what he thought was a dead spider, the spider got back up and wound up biting him, which, yeah, it gave him spider powers, though it didn't work out as well for him as it did for Peter, as apparently, because he was a more mature body, the spider DNA had a harder time mixing with his own genetic structure, and he wound up mutating into a more feral creature. Ultimately, the Shield of this universe did hunt him down, and did manage to bring him back to the realm of sanity, evening out his powers so that they were more integrated into his body, and bringing him back to a stable state of mind, which is what allowed him to finally become this world's Spider-Man. But, you want to know something that gets my goat about this? Every issue of Bullet Points until issue 5 essentially is an origin story for another one of this world's superheroes. There's an ongoing plot going on through it, but each of these backstories does still feed into the overarching plot and where things are overall going. Every one except Spider-Man's. In Bullet Points, for whatever reason, Bruce Banner's origin story as Spider-Man was told through issue 4, and by the end of issue 4, you do see him in his Spidey suit, which I'm going to comment the suit right now. It's essentially, like with Assassin Spider-Man, it's like a Black Ops version of the Spider-Man costume, but whereas that one was mixing in regular Spider-Man motifs, this one essentially mixes the Spider-Man costume with a more professional look, giving him a belt, and essentially it does look like the regular Spider-Man costume, but instead of it being red and blue, it's white and black with his eye holes being red, so there you go. But basically, after we see Bruce Banner as Spider-Man, he does nothing in the story. I'm not even kidding. Issue 5 is where the big climax of the story happens, which I'm not going to get into because of spoilers, but put simply, he plays no part in the climax of the story, and from the moment we see Bruce Banner as Spider-Man, he does nothing. Throughout the rest of the story, he's just there, in the background, taking part in group shots of fight scenes. He's just there. Offers nothing, and contributes nothing to the story. You could literally take him out, and nothing would change in the climax. So, and the thing is, Bullet Point's a guilty pleasure of mine. I understand that there are flaws with it, but I do still legitimately enjoy the book for what it is. So, when I heard about Spider-Verse and how it was trying to bring together all these different Spider-Men, I thought, this would be cool, this would be awesome. What if they brought Bullet Point Spider-Man in? We could finally see him do something and actually define himself beyond just being the guy in the background. As I mentioned, he gets killed off the first time he appears in this stupid thing. Just, why? Like, and this is again a microcosm of the problems I mentioned when I talked about when I looked at the 1602 story. Because this is a pre-established Spider-Man that I, as a fan, was looking forward to seeing and wanted to see more with. And yet, when he pops in, he's just killed off as cannon fodder. It makes me upset because, again, he does nothing. He's just there. He literally, like, in his initial story, he's just there to set up this world as a Spider-Man. And then in Spider-Verse, when they bring him back in, he gets killed off right away. After, like, he gets his spine snapped, and then the next time we see him, Deimos and the rest of his siblings are feeding off of his life force. So guess what? He's gone now. Did nothing, contributed nothing, and that's another, and again, that's a microcosm. Let my reaction here be a little microcosm of the problems that can be inherent in Spider-Verse. Because the thing is, imagine, if you will, you read this story, you pick it up and learn of its gimmick. And it's a cool gimmick, and like I said, I love Spider-Verse. I love reading it, or else why would I have this giant-ass book? Why would I collect all this stuff? Why would I be doing these vlogs if I didn't love Spider-Verse? But the thing about that is, imagine you come reading this, and you're hoping to see maybe your favorite Spider-Man. You want to go in and see a character from maybe like an issue of What If, or a mini-series that you enjoyed and want to see more of, but then when you actually read it, you find that they're the next Spider-Man on the chopping block. It can be disappointing. And it can feel like a slap in the face if you were a fan of those characters, but they're only introduced so they can be offed. Even worse, if it's just an unceremonious death. Just they're killed off they're just killed off to showcase how powerful the bad guys are. In many regards, it can feel insulting. It can feel insulting that you enjoyed reading about these characters. Well, they're gone now. It's annoying. It's disappointing. And let my reaction with the Bruce Banner Spider-Man's death be that kind of help showcase that. Because again, this was a Spider-Man who even in his own universe kind of got the shaft. So now that he's in this event, maybe this is a chance for him to shine again, actually showcase what he's worth, and maybe be actually actually showcase what he brings to the table as Spider-Man. But then he's so unceremoniously killed off, and there is some good story potential that you could have had there. Because again, in Bruce Banner's universe, Peter was the Hulk. Imagine, if you will, Bruce seeing so many alternate versions of Spider-Man and learning that most of them are Peter Parker. Just kind of how he would react to knowing that in so many other worlds, Peter had a different life. That he didn't become this big green monster because of him. That maybe in those realities he became the monster. Would he be relieved that at least Peter had a good life? Or would he lament that he was turned into a monster instead? It would be an interesting thing to look at and examine. But again, he gets killed off, and I'm not going to try and ponder on what could have happened. I'm just going to talk about what had happened, and again, it just feels disappointing to have him get killed off so quickly. And again, that's just me as a fan of this particular Spidey. And I can just imagine how many other fans would react if they read about an alternate Spidey and saw them they read one of these alternate universe stories and then saw that Spider-Man get killed off in the book. So, there you go. Again, that's just my own personal beef. I think I had more to say, potentially, regarding the Inheritors, but the biggest flaw I can really think of is how quickly things happen, but I'm willing to brush that off because, again, we've had a bunch of lead-in material for the storyline, so at this point, the only thing they're really trying to establish is how Peter gets pulled into the fray, so I'm gonna let the whole Russian complaint be pushed aside for now, so otherwise, I'm trying to think, is there any other problems I have with this book? Not that I can think of. Oh, one more thing I could probably mention. Oh, actually, you know what? I'll save that for another issue. Another little thing I do like is that in Loom World we do see other versions of Spider-Man characters, which they're essentially subservient to the Inheritors, but we'll get more into them later. But it's a nice little snippet, so there you go. But otherwise, though, I I do think I do overall. I think this is still a good comic. I still think this is. I do think this is a strong way to introduce the Spider-Verse storyline. Basically the whole point of the issue is to bring Peter in, establish his role in the Spider Army, and and basically help introduce him to the situation. It further showcases it further showcases the Inheritors and their dynamic as as a supervillain team and as a family, and how and not just and not just more gives more shadow into their characters, but also into their respective character arc, but also into their respective reactions to learning about the spiders in the multiverse gathering together, while also laying down hints for future storylines. Again, it's cool to see them all. Again, it's still awesome seeing all these Spideys in the same room together. It was cool seeing all the various Spideys appear in one area to recruit Peter Parker, and while it still ticks me off to no end seeing Bullet Point Spider-Man get so unceremoniously killed off, which that was my reaction. I feel sorry for anyone else whose favorite Spider-Man was killed in this event, which, yeah, I kind of talked about when I looked at the 1602 story. But bottom line, I do think this is a strong beginning. It's a good way of leading you in. It further establishes the villains. It further sets up the heroes and their relation to the story. And overall, I think just works. On top of that, it does still lay down character foundation for other characters, like with Mayday, and further establishes what her arc further adds to her arc as she holds her brother. So, yeah, overall, I think it's a strong beginning. I think it's a strong beginning, and I think it's a lot of fun still seeing all these Spideys in the same room together, while also showcasing the Inheritors and showcasing the Inheritors, building on them, building what they're doing, and their reaction to the whole and all the Spideys meeting up. So, yeah, overall, enjoyed the issue, a lot of fun. Enjoyed the issue, had fun. So, yeah, that's about it. Apologies that this is an hour-long video. I did not mean for it to go that way, but tangents take a while to get through. But again, but I'm still going to apologize. But I hope you still enjoy this regardless, and hopefully on Tuesday we'll be having a shorter vlog as we dive into the next part of the Spider-Verse storyline, and we see we finally see both Spider Armies finally coming together, and the resultant chaos that can ensue from that. So till then, hope you have a good day. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll see you next time. Take care.